Welcome to 35th Scale Modeler, where I bring World War II history to life in 1/35th scale. This is Inside the 88, Build Series Part 1, and today we're taking a detailed look inside Tamiya's 88mm Flak 36/37, kit number 35017. This legendary gun will anchor an upcoming winter diorama, and this episode sets the stage for the entire build. This particular kit was recovered through the generosity of a close friend, passed from one set of hands to another, preserved and delivered for examination. This transmission will focus solely on the base kit as issued. Aftermarket components and detailing materials will be reviewed in a separate briefing. Before we begin the inspection, we're going to step back in time and look at the real weapon system behind this model. The 88, a number that became synonymous with precision, fear, and engineering without compromise. Originally designed as a high-altitude anti-aircraft gun, the 88mm Flak was intended to reach enemy bombers at altitudes other guns could not. But on the battlefields of North Africa, its purpose changed. Crews discovered that its velocity and accuracy made it devastating against armored vehicles. A single well-placed shot could disable a tank long before it reached its effective range. British tank crews learned to identify its silhouette instantly: a narrow shield, a long barrel, and a crew that worked with mechanical precision. On the Eastern Front, the 88mm Flak became more than a weapon. It became a defensive anchor across vast, exposed landscapes where there was nowhere to hide. Its ability to fire rapidly, relocate quickly, and engage targets across open ground made it indispensable to the units that depended on it for survival. The gun's carriage allowed it to be transported in two separate loads, hauled forward under difficult conditions, then reassembled and brought into action in minutes. Crews trained relentlessly to reduce setup time, rehearsing each movement until it became instinct. In those moments, seconds weren't just efficiency. They were the difference between being overrun and holding the line. By the end of the war, the 88mm Flak had earned a reputation as one of the most effective artillery pieces ever fielded. Its design influenced post-war anti-aircraft and anti-tank systems across multiple nations. Today, surviving examples stand in museums, training grounds, and private collections, silent reminders of the weapon's reach and the crews who operated it. Its engineering, its silhouette, and its battlefield legacy continue to be studied by historians and modelers alike. What you are about to see is a scaled reconstruction of that weapon system, a miniature artifact built piece by piece and preserved as a fragment of engineering history. With that context in place, we'll begin our examination of the kit and the components Tamiya provides for this reconstruction. Every kit tells a story long before the first part is cut. This box has been opened, examined, and carefully restored. Its sprues returned in a curated arrangement rather than a sealed factory layout. Inside, the placement is intentional, each sprue set down with purpose, organized for examination rather than storage. We'll review each sprue in sequence, looking at the molding, the engineering, and the details preserved in this restored kit. Sprue A contains the major structural elements of the 88, the barrel sections, the recoil housing, and the elevation gear that defines the weapon's silhouette. These assemblies form the mechanical core of the gun. Every adjustment and every shot of the real weapon pass through the systems represented here. The molding reflects the era of the kit's design, a blend of crisp definition and softened detail, where the engineering intent remains clear even as the tooling shows its age. The barrel halves are a practical solution of early manufacturing, but they leave a seam along the full length of the tube. This will be replaced with a turned metal barrel, restoring the clean, uninterrupted profile of the original. The recoil housing and elevation gear are simplified, yet structurally accurate. These parts set the alignment for the stages that follow, anchoring the geometry of the build. Sprue A is the foundation, where engineering and reconstruction begin to converge. Sprue B brings together the carriage and the outriggers, the structural assemblies that stabilized the 88 when the weapon was brought into firing position. These components supported the weight of the gun, absorbing recoil forces and anchoring the platform during sustained operation. Even in simplified kit form, the geometry of the outriggers and carriage conveys the practical engineering of the real system. This sprue also includes the motorcycle and a single figure, a narrative element from the kit's original release, representing the liaison vehicles that moved messages and personnel between gun crews. These accessories will not appear in the final build, but they remain part of the kit's historical footprint. Sprue B completes the structural framework, linking mobility and stability within the weapon's design. Sprue C contains the bogies and the cable reels, the transport and support assemblies that allowed the 88 to be moved, positioned, and anchored for firing. The bogies carried the full weight of the weapon during transport, locking into place when the gun was lowered into firing position. Even in simplified kit form, their structure reflects the engineering of the real system. The cable reels supported the electrical connections used in certain firing setups. They may look like simple spools of wire, but they carried the electrical lines used when the gun's firing system required them. Together, these components link mobility and function, the systems that moved the gun into place and enabled it to fire. This sprue holds the transport tires, the components that allowed the 88 to be moved from one firing position to the next. They carried the weight of the carriage during travel, absorbing vibration and uneven ground as the crew repositioned the weapon. The molding captures the tread and sidewall form typical of period photographs, a practical representation of a part that was essential to the gun's mobility. Sprue D contains the kit's original crew figures, posed to represent the men who operated the 88. Their sculpting reflects the era of the kit, simplified uniforms, broad shapes, and proportions noticeably shorter than an average wartime crewman. They were included to suggest activity around the gun, offering a basic sense of how the crew interacted with the weapon system. For the final diorama, these figures will be replaced with an aftermarket crew that provides accurate size, posture, and a more realistic presence in the scene. I wanted to revisit Sprue A and talk in more detail about the barrel and the shield, two parts that benefit greatly from aftermarket replacements. The kit provides the barrel in two halves, a common approach for its age, but it leaves a seam running the full length of the tube. Filling and sanding that seam is possible, yet it risks flattening the taper and diminishing the crisp geometry that defines the stepped profile of the 88. A turned metal barrel avoids all of that. It offers a true, uninterrupted surface, precise machining at the muzzle, and the sharp definition that holds up under close inspection. The shield presents its own limitations. The kit captures the general shape, but the plastic thickness is far out of scale, and the edges lack the thin, clean lines seen in period photographs. Aftermarket photo etch restores the correct plate thickness, the rivet detail, and the structural geometry that gives the shield its character. Together, these upgrades bring Sprue A to life. On the real 88mm flak, the electrical cables on the spools were part of the fire control system, linking each gun so azimuth, elevation, and fuse setting data could be sent from a central director. In the kit, these cables are molded thicker than the actual cables and don't capture the scale of the real wiring. Replacing them with fine aftermarket tubing restores the correct diameter and the functional look of the fire control connections. The kit includes a small decal sheet with basic stenciling and period-appropriate markings offering options for at least 12 different divisional insignia. They're functional for a kit of this age, but the printing is simple and the film is noticeably thicker than modern standards. Some of these decals will be used, but several will be replaced with aftermarket options to better match the time frame of the final diorama. The booklet opens with a plain black and white cover, the title, 4 images of the completed kit contents, and the Tamiya logo. A simple, utilitarian introduction to the build. Pages 2, 3, and 4 present the historical background. The text is concise, offering a broad overview of the 88mm flak and its role during the war. It's not exhaustive, but it provides enough context to frame the build, reminding the reader that this was a complex weapon with a long operational history. Page 5 shifts into assembly, beginning with the Zundap motorcycle. It's a complete set of steps for a vehicle included in the original kit concept, though it won't be part of this build. The diagrams are clean and functional, but for this project, these steps will be skipped. Page 6 begins the core of the model. Here, the outriggers are assembled, installed, and integrated into the gun's base carriage. The drawings show the major components clearly, though some of the finer details are simplified. Page 7 continues with the gun base and introduces the first steps of the barrel and top carriage. The assemblies are broken into small clusters, each shown in isolation before being brought together. Page 8 moves deeper into the internal mechanisms, the gun cradle, the recuperator, and the automatic rammer. These are some of the most intricate components of the 88, yet the diagrams remain simple, relying on outlines and arrows rather than detailed renderings. Page 9 brings the major assemblies together. Right side components are installed first, followed by 3 ammunition containers, then the left side parts. The page concludes with the completion of the gun assembly. Page 10 shifts to the bogies. The steps cover the basic frames, the steering arm, and the upper structures that allow the gun to be transported. The drawings are clear enough, but the mechanical complexity of the real system is reduced to a few simplified shapes. Page 11 completes the bogies and mounts the gun base onto them. It's one of the more visually dense pages with multiple subassemblies converging into a single structure. The booklet presents it as clean, linear process. Page 12 shows the final completion of the 88mm gun and introduces the assembly of the crew figures. The figures are broken into simple front and back diagrams, typical of the kits from this period. The gun itself is shown in its finished form, the culmination of all previous steps. Page 13 provides the painting guide. It's minimal, a few color callouts, and a short note on wartime finishes. There's a brief discussion of German colors used during the period. Page 14 covers decal placement. The diagrams indicate where the markings should be applied, though the instructions remain sparse. It's a functional guide offering basic placement rather than detailed reference. Page 15 presents the parts list and the sprue diagrams. Every component is shown in outline, labeled for identification. It's a practical reference page, the kind builders return to repeatedly during assembly. And finally, page 16, the back cover. It features images of other Tamiya kits from the same era, a small snapshot of the company's catalog at the time and the broader context in which this kit was produced. With the inspection complete, everything returns to the box in the same controlled order that it came out. The sprues are going to go back in one by one in reverse alphabetical order. Each sprue is checked as it goes in, making sure nothing flexes, nothing snags, and nothing is under tension. Once everything is seated cleanly, the lid closes without resistance, restoring the kit to its original organized state, ready for the build to begin. The build will incorporate aftermarket components, selected to enhance accuracy, refine detail, and strengthen the final presentation of the completed piece. These upgrades will be examined in a separate video, where each component is reviewed in detail. With the kit examined and the enhancements identified, the work now shifts to preparation and assembly, cleaning parts, refining surfaces, and beginning the first steps of construction.